You have reached the Ultimate Read Podcast. Welcome to Dee Tea Podcast. Yes, I get into it on every episode, reading to you amazing books, articles, stories, and the comments, because we live for the comments. Stay locked in, because more amazing reads about to explode your ears. Listen on. You will be intrigued, entertained, and much more. DT Podcast. All About Love by Bell Hooks is going to be our ultimate very first read on DT Podcast. And I know you're going to love it. So it's going to be quite interesting as we read on, getting to know what is really going on this read. Much more that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to also get into another book as well. But this book by Bell Hooks is going to be my very first read, and I know it's going to be so interesting. You take a look more about her. So, guys, yes, and he has an amazing photo of her. Incredible. She's an incredible author, and we are going to get into it. I'm going to really read up this book, in as much as we're going to cover a lot of other books as well. Guess what? I got another one for you. It's a pretty great read, and it is actually a book on black cake. Um, this is a book as well. I got many other books to read up for you, but we're gonna get into this one as well on this episode. And it's by Shaman Wilkerson, and it's actually Black Cake is on Hulu. You can watch it. Amazing. Go watch it. You would love it. It's on Hulu. Go check it out, Black Cake. So we're gonna be diving into this novel as well. It's gonna be an amazing read. It's gonna be an amazing DT podcast, guys. Yes, the very first episode of DT, and this is brought to you by, specially sponsored by Tilo. So make sure you guys check out the links. I will share the links below and also throughout, so you can see the various products that Tilo provides to DT Podcast, an amazing sponsor. And we appreciate all the fundings that come our way to make this podcast a possibility. Thank you to our sponsor, and we're looking forward to get more sponsors. So if you would like to sponsor DT Podcast as we go on reading more books, many more books, and if you know of any great books, please do recommend it to me, and send it in the comments because we live for the comments. Show your recommendations of the books in the comments so that we can get into it and read to you, because that's what I want to do. I just want to read. We're just going to get real. And as I read, now and then I will stop and, give my instant beats about what we've read and so on, and really getting into all the amazing things. So we're going to keep moving on. So in this, all about love, there are amazing, great chapters. The introduction, grace, touched by love. We're gonna get into this introduction, touched by love. It sounds really interesting. So, as you know, this is my first time diving into this book with you, and If perhaps you have already read this book, I'm sure that you would love to listen to it as well on the Tea Podcast. So let's go on to get into the introduction and get into it some more. Listen on. On my kitchen wall hang four snapshots of graffiti art I first saw on construction walls as I walked to my teaching job at Yale University years ago. The Declaration. The search for love continues even in the face of great odds, was painted in bright colors. At the time, recently separated from a partner of almost 15 years, I was often overwhelmed by grief so profound it seemed as though an immense sea of pain was washing my heart and soul away. Overcome by sensations of being pulled underwater, drowning, I was constantly searching for anchors to keep me afloat, to pull me back safely to the shore. The declaration on the construction walls, with its childlike drawings of unidentifiable animals, always lifted my spirits. Whenever I passed this site, the affirmation of love's possibility sprawling across the block gave me hope. Yeah, definitely, I can feel that. Signed with the first name of local artists, these works spoke to my heart. Reading them, I felt certain the artist was undergoing a crisis in his life, either already confronting loss or facing the possibility of loss. In my head, I engaged in imaginary conversations about the meaning of love with him. I told him how his playful graffiti art anchored me and helped restore my faith in love. I talked about the way this decoration, with its promise of a love waiting to be found, a love I could still hope for, lifted me out of the abyss I had fallen into. My grief was a heavy, disappearing sadness caused by parting from a companion of many years, but more important, it was a despair rooted in the fear that love did not exist, could not be found, and even if it were lurking somewhere, I might never know it in my lifetime. It had become hard for me to continue to believe in love's promise when everywhere I turned, the enchantment of power or the terror of fear overshadowed the will to love. One day, on my way to work, looking forward to the day's meditation on love that the sight of the graffiti art engendered, I was stunned to find that the construction company had painted over the picture with a white paint so glaringly bright it was possible to see faint traces of the original art underneath. Upset that what had now become a ritual affirmation of love's grace was no longer there to welcome me. I told everyone of my disappointment. Finally, someone passed on the rumor that the graffiti art had been whitewashed because the words were a reference to individuals living with HIV and that the artist might be gay. Perhaps it is just as likely that the men who splashed paint on the wall were frightened by this public confession of a longing for love. A longing so intense it could not only be spoken but was deliberately searched for. After much searching, I located the artist and talked with him face to face about the meaning of love. We spoke about the way public art can be a vehicle for the sharing of life affirming thoughts, and we both expressed our grief and annoyance that the construction company had so callously covered up a powerful message about love. To remind me of the construction walls, he gave me snapshots of the graffiti art. From time we met, everywhere I had lived, I had placed these snapshots above my kitchen sink. Every day, when I drink water or take a dish from the cupboard, I stand before this reminder that we yearn for love, that we seek it, even when we lack hope that it really can be found. There are not many public discussions of love in our culture right now. At best, popular culture is the one domain in which our longing for love is talked about. Movies, music, magazines, and books are the place where we turn to, yeah, our yearnings for love expressed. Yet, the talk is not the life affirming discourse of the 60s and 70s, which urge us to believe all you need is love. All you need is love. All you need is love. Nowadays, the most popular messages are those that declare the meaningless of love its irrelevance. A glaring example of this cultural shift was the tremendous popularity of Tina Turner's song with the title boldly declared, "What's love got to do with it?" What's love got to do with it? What's love? A secondary emotion. Okay, continuing. I was saddened and appalled when I interviewed a well known female rapper, at least 20 years my junior, who, when asked about love, responded with biting sarcasm. Love? What's that? I have never had any love in my life. Youth culture today is cynical about love, and that cynicism cynicism. And that cynicism has come from the perceived feeling that love cannot be found. Expressing this concern in When All You've Ever Wanted Isn't Enough, Harold Kushner writes, I am afraid that we may be raising a generation of young people who will grow up afraid to love, afraid to give themselves completely to another person because they will have seen how much it hurts to take the risk of loving and have it not work out. I am afraid that they will grow up looking for intimacy without risk, for pleasure without significant emotional investment. Unfortunately, this is very much true as of today, the crazy dating scene. Hopefully, we can bring a change to that. Yes, to black love. They will be so fearful of the pain of disappointment that they will forego the possibilities of love and joy. Young people are cynical about love. Ultimately, cynicism is the great mask of the disappointed and betrayed heart. When I travel around the nation giving lectures about ending racism and sexism, audiences, especially young listeners, become agitated when I speak about the place of love in any movement for social justice. Indeed, all the great movements for social justice in our society have strongly emphasized a love ethic. Yet young listeners remain reluctant to embrace the idea of love as a transformative force. To them, love is for the naive, the weak, the hopelessly romantic. There's nothing wrong with being hopelessly romantic. Their attitude is mirrored in the grown ups they turn to for explanations. As spokesperson for disillusioned generation, Elizabeth Wurtzel sets in Bitch in praise of difficult women. Good. None of us are getting better at loving. We are getting more scared of it. We were not given good skills to begin with. And the choices we make have tended only to reinforce our sense that it is hopeless and useless. Her words echo all that I hear an older generation say about love. When I talked of love with my generation, I found it made everyone nervous or scared, especially when I spoke about not feeling loved enough. On several occasions, as I talked about love with friends, I was told I should consider seeing a therapist. Consider seeing a therapist. Okay. I understand that a few friends were simply wary of my bringing up the topic of love and felt that if I saw a therapist, it would give them a break. It'd be your own friends. But most folks were just frightened of what might be revealed in any exploration of the meaning of love in our lives. Yet, Whenever a single woman over 40 brings up the topic of love again and again, the assumption rooted in sexist thinking is that she is desperate for a man. No one thinks she is simply passionately, intellectually interested in the subject matter. No one thinks she is rigorously engaged in a philosophical undertaking wherein she is endeavored to understand the metaphysical meaning of love in everyday life. No, she is just seen as one on the road to fatal attraction. Disappointment and pervasive feelings of brokenheartedness led me to begin thinking more deeply about the meaning of love in our culture. My longing to find love did not make me lose any sense of reasoning or perspective. It gave me the incentive to think more, to talk about love, and to study popular and more serious writing on the subject. As I pored over nonfiction books on the subject of love, I was surprised to find that the vast majority of the revered books once used as reference works and even those popular as self-help books have been written by men. Uh-huh. All my life, I have thought of love as primarily a topic women contemplate with greater intensity and vigor than anybody else on the planet. I still hold this belief, even though visionary female thinking on the subject has yet to be taken as seriously as the thoughts and writings of men. Men. Mm. Yeah. Men theorize about love, but women are more often loves practitioners. Yes. Most men feel that they receive love and therefore know what it feels like to be loved. Women often feel we are in a constant state of yearning, wanting love but not receiving it. In philosophy, Jacob Needlesman Mer, a little book about love, virtually all the major narratives of love he comments on are written by men. Men. His list of significant references doesn't include books written by women. Throughout my graduate school training for doctorate in literature, I can recall only one woman poet being extolled as a high priestess of love, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. She was, however, considered a minor poet, yet even the most non-literary student among us knew the opening line of her most well-known sonnet. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. This was in pre-feminist days. In the wake of the contemporary feminist movement, the Greek poet Sappho has now become enshrined as another love goddess. Back then, in every creative writing course, the poets dedicated to the love poem were always male. Indeed, the partner I left after many years first courted me with a love poem. He had always been emotionally unavailable and not at all interested in love as either a topic for discussion or a daily life practice. But he was absolutely confident that he had something meaningful to say on the subject. I, on the other hand, thought all my grown ups I, on the other hand, thought all my grown up attempts to write love poems were mushy and pathetic. Words failed me when I tried to write about love. My thoughts seemed sentimental, silly, and superficial. When writing poetry in my girlhood, I had felt the same confidence I would come to see in my adult life only in male writers. When I first began to write poetry in girlhood, I thought love was the only topic, the most important passion. Indeed, the first poem I published at age 12 was called A Look at Love. Somewhere along the way in that passage from girlhood to womanhood, I learned females really had nothing serious to teach the world about love. Death became my chosen topic. No one around me, professors and students alike, doubted a woman's ability to be serious when it came to thinking and writing about death. All the poems in my first book were on the topic of death and dying. Even so, the poem that opened the book, The Woman's Mourning Psalm, was about the loss of a loved one and the refusal to let death destroy memory. Contemplating death has always been a subject that leads me back to love. Significantly, I began to think more about the meaning of love as I witnessed the death of many friends, comrades, and acquaintances, many of them dying young and unexpectedly. When I was approaching the age of 40 and facing the type of cancer scares that have become so commonplace in women's lives, they are practically routine. My first thought as I waited for test results was that I was not ready to die because I had not yet found the love my heart had been seeking. Shortly after this crisis ended, I had a grave illness that was life threatening. Confronting the possibility of dying, I became obsessed with the meaning of love in my life and in contemporary culture. My work as a cultural critic of offered me a constant opportunity to pay close attention to everything the mass media, particularly movies and magazines, tell us about love. Mostly they tell us that everyone wants love, but that we remain totally confused about the practice of love in everyday life. In popular culture, love is always the stuff of fantasy. Maybe this is why men have done most of the theorizing about love. Fantasy has primarily been their domain, both in the sphere of cultural production and everyday life. Male fantasy is seen as something that can create reality, whereas female fantasy is regarded as pure escape. Hence, the romance novel remains the only domain in which women speak of love with any degree of authority. However, when men appropriate the romance genre, their work is far more rewarding than is the writing of women. A book like The Bridges of Madison County is the supreme example. Had a woman penned this sentimental, shallow story of love, which did, though, have its moments, it is unlikely it would ever have become such a major mainstream success, crossing all boundaries of genre. Of course, consumers of books about love are primarily female, yet male sexism alone does not explain the lack of more books by and about love written by women. Apparently, women are both willing and eager to hear what men have to say about love. Female sexist thinking may lead a woman to feel she already knows what another woman will say. Such a reader may feel that she has more to gain by reading what men have to say. Now, let's see what she's actually saying about female sexist. Especially, there's a lot of women. There's a lot of us. Sometimes I would say interchangeably, um, we do tend to want to hear more of what a man has to say about love and relationship. And why I say that is because even when be defined against wanting to know what a man thinks about them, they still want to know the thoughts of a man towards a woman, or the thoughts of a man about a woman, or what makes men um, turn from being one that is not caring at all and one that will become someone that actually would invest in loving you as a person. So I can see what she is saying in this regards because there are so many things that we listen to and watch over the internet and social media. We see constantly a lot of talks about that. We listen more intensely and more. We want to hear what, not what they think, but what they feel. You know, what they feel and what can make them choose to love a person. So that it's as if you want to, um, how would I say it? As if one would want to try to reform or try to conform to a certain way in order to win a man's heart. Something like that. But I must say, as women, we need to value each other's input about love as much as we value the input of men about love. And it's because we are easy givers of love and men are not easy givers of love. We want to know some way, somehow from them if they are up to talking because, a lot of men hardly speak. So when a man actually speaks on that topic or any topic that relates to relationship, we keenly want to hear what's inside of their head and how they process things and how they process being in a relationship with a woman that they love versus being in a relationship with a woman that they just tolerating. Because, yes, there are some men that will stay in a relationship just tolerating a woman, and there are those who stay in a relationship because they actually love that woman. So, we don't want to be on the side of being tolerated, we want to be on the side of being loved. So, a lot of times, as women, we can be honest with yourself. We want to know what's inside of there, what they're thinking and what they're processing things and what makes a man tick, what makes him flip that switch and begin to actually really love and cherish that woman. What is it that make that switch and cause that to happen? Because at some point, they all become move from a boy to a man, and they progress from that boyish thinking to the manly thinking, and so there is something that that a woman does, or a woman says, or ways that a woman acts, or things that a woman would do that would ignite that love within that man. And so that's where I can see what she's actually saying in this regard. And so I'm going to come back more and read more on this. We have read up to this chapter. We still got a lot more to go in the introduction. Not really much. I said just 3 pages. I could continue reading it and finish it all up. I think I should. You know what? I think I should continue reading and finish all up because I don't have much pages left to read on this matter. So let's continue. Listen on. And yes, so back to where I stopped. Yes, so early. Yes, such a reader may feel that she has more to gain by reading what men have to say. Earlier in my life, I read books about love and never thought about the gender of the writer. Eager to understand what we mean when we speak of love, I did not really consider the extent to which gender shaped a writer's perspective. I could see that as well. It was only when I began to think seriously about the subject of love and to write about it that I pondered whether women do this differently from men. To answer that question, yes, yes, and yes, a million times. We are very much different. Reviewing the literature on love, I noticed how few writers, male or female, talk about the impact of patriarchy, correct myself, patriarchy, the way in which male domination of women and children stand in the ways of love. John Bradshaw's Creating Love, The Next Great Stage of Growth, is one of my favorite books on the topic. He valiantly attempts to establish the link between male domination, the institutionalization of patriarchy, and the lack of love of families, famous for works that calls attention to the inner child. Bradshaw believes that ending patriarchy is one step in the direction of love. However, his work on love has never received ongoing attention and celebration. It did not get the notice given work by men who write about love while affirming sexist defined gender roles. Profound changes in the way we think and act must take place if we are to create a loving culture. Men writing about love always testify that they have received love. They speak from this position, it gives what they say authority. Women, more often than not, speak from a position of lack, of not having received the love we long for. That is, I can definitely say that for real. But other times we always, it's like we always grieving. Either we grieving lost love or we grieving um love not found. It's like love too has been in the death stage. Like before it reaches us, it dies. Hmm. And so then we always discussing in the fact of longing. We are always discussing the fact of what I want, what I long for from a man. We always like what I long for from a man, or what I long for from a husband, or what would really appease me, or what would really change the way in which I move and love is if this man do this or if this man do that. It's always dependent on. It's always a lack, and that's. I definitely agree with her on that. Yes, a woman who talks of love is still suspect. Perhaps this is because all that enlightened woman may have to say about love will stand as a direct threat and challenge to the visions men have offered us. I enjoy what male writers have to say about love. I cherish my Rumi and my Rilke, male poets who stir hearts with their words. Men often write about love through fantasy, through what they imagine is possible rather than what they concretely know. We know now that Rilke did not write as he lived, that so many words of love offered us by great men fail us when we come face to face with reality. And even though John Gray's work troubles me and makes me mad, I confess to reading and rereading Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. We all know this book, right? But like many women and men, I want to know about the meaning of love beyond the realm of fantasy, beyond what we imagine can happen. I want to know love's truth as we live them. Almost all the recent popular self-help writing by men on love, from works like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, to John Wellwood's Love and Awakening, make us a feminist perspective on gender roles. Ultimately, though, the authors remain wedded to belief systems which suggest that there are basic inherent differences between women and men. Yes, there are. In actuality, all the concrete proof indicates that while the perspectives of men and women often differ, these differences are learned characteristics, not innate or natural traits. Men and women are different. If the notion that men and women were absolute opposites inhabiting totally different emotional universes were true, men would never have become the supreme authorities on love. Given gender stereotypes that assign to women the role of feelings and being emotionally, and to men the role of reason and non emotion, real men would shy away from any talk of love. Estrogen and testosterone. That's all I gotta say. Women are different from men. As much as we might try to defy that, we are different. And I don't see why the battle of what's wrong with being different. I mean, difference is what makes the world go round. If we were both the same, then what's the point? Um, Difference is what create difference actually birth creativity. Difference actually create things. It's because of difference that there is many creative things. So there is persons of various aspects and skills and talent and all of that. We are different. Our thought process is different. Can you imagine if your thought process was exactly the same as another person? And there are millions of people who think exactly like you. That all men and women think exactly the very same. There is no difference in thought. There is no difference in mannerism. There is no difference in behaviors. There is no difference in beliefs. There is no difference in concept. There is no difference in understanding. We would all be like robots. We would all be like clones, pretty much a clone of people. But we are not a clone of people. We should not run from different. And that is why we love differently. Men and women love differently. So then what? How do we unify our love then? We unify our love by understanding and acceptance and compromise. Understanding, acceptance, and compromising. Understanding that we are different, accepting our differences, and compromising. That way, each is able to fully satisfy each other and complement each other well. That's just it. But do men want to compromise? Most of the time, women compromise in the case of love. And that's where our struggle with longing is. We understand them better than they understand us. And that's the reason why we want to dig into the minds of a man in terms of love, to see how we can let them understand us so they can love us right. But some men are very stubborn in wanting to understand and compromise, in wanting to understand, accept, and compromise. And that's what's missing: understanding, accepting, and compromising. Okay, let's read on. That's my perspective. I might be wrong, but that's my perspective. Okay, guys, moving along. Whew. Okay, where were we at? Though considered the established authorities on the subject, only a few men talk freely, telling the world what they think about love. In everyday life, males and females alike are relatively silent about love. Our silence shields us from uncertainty. We want to know love. We are simply afraid the desire to know too much about love will lead us closer and closer to the beasts of lovelessness. While ours is a nation wherein the vast majority of citizens are followers of religious faiths that proclaim the transformative power of love, many people feel that they do not have a clue as to how to love. And practically everyone suffers a crisis of faith when it comes to realizing biblical theories about the art of loving in everyday life. It is far easier to talk about loss than it is to talk about love. It is easier to articulate the pain of love's absence than to describe its presence and meaning in our lives. Taught to believe that the mind, not the heart, is the seat of learning. Many of us believe that to speak of love with an emotional intensity means we will be perceived as weak and irrational. And it is especially hard to speak of love when what we have to say calls attention to the fact that lovelessness is more common than love. That many of us are not sure what we mean when we talk of love or how to express love. Everyone wants to know more about love. We want to know what it means to love. what we can do in our everyday lives to love and be loved. We want to know how to seduce those among us who remain wedded to lovelessness and open the door to their hearts to let love enter. The strength of our desire does not change the power of our cultural uncertainty. Everywhere we learn that love is important, and yet we are bombarded by its failure. In the realm of the political, among the religious, in our families, and in our romantic lives, we see little indication that love informs decisions, strengthens our understanding of community, or keeps us together. This bleak picture in no way alters the nature of our longing. We still hope that love will prevail. We still believe in love's promise. Just as the graffiti proclaimed, our hope lies in the reality that so many of us continue to believe in love's power. We believe it is important to know love. We believe it is important to search for love's truth. In an overwhelming number of private conversations and public dialogues, I have given unheard testimony about the mounting lovelessness in our culture and the fear it strikes in everyone's heart. This despair about love is coupled with a callous cynicism that frowns upon any suggestion that love isn't as important as work, as crucial to our survival as a nation, as a drive to succeed. Awesomely, our nation, like no other in the world, is a culture driven by the quest to love. It's the theme of our movies, music, literature. Even as it offers so little opportunity for us to understand love's meaning or to know how to realize love in word and deed. Our nation is equally driven by sexual obsession. There is no aspect of sexuality that is not studied, talked about, or demonstrated. How two classes exist for every dimension of sexuality, even masturbation. Yet schools for love do not exist. Everyone assumes that we will know how to love instinctively, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. We will accept that the family is a primary school for love. Those of us who do not learn how to love among family are expected to experience love in romantic relationships. However, this love often eludes us, and we spend a lifetime undoing the damage caused by cruelty, neglect, and all manner of lovelessness experienced in our families of origin and in relationships where we simply did not know what to do. Only love can heal the wounds of the past. However, the intensity of our woundedness often leads to a closing of the heart. Mhm. Making it impossible for us to give or receive the love that is given to us. To open our hearts more fully to love's power and grace, we must dare to acknowledge how little we know of love in both theory and practice. We must face the confusion and disappointment that much of what we taught about the nature of love makes no sense when applied to daily life. Contemplating the practice of love in everyday life, thinking about how we love and what is needed for us to become a culture where love's sacred presence can be felt everywhere. I wrote this meditation. As a title all about love, New Visions indicates we want to live in a culture where love can flourish. We yearn to end the lovelessness that is so pervasive in our society. This book tells us how to return to love, all about love. New Visions provides radical new ways to think about the art of love, offering a hopeful, joyous vision of love's transformative power. It lets us know that we must do to love again. Guidance love's wisdom. It lets us know what we must do to be touched by love. Beautiful introduction. Beautiful introduction. And next time, DT podcast. I'm gonna get into it with right into chapter one, clarity. Give love words. And this that really amazing read. Bell Hooks, All About Love. New Visions, a New York Times bestseller. Awesome read. I really enjoyed it this year. Um, so to get into our next book, um, Black Ink. Oh my gosh. When I tell you this series on Hulu, that's when I learned about this book. And then after watching the entire series, I went and got this book. Oh my God. I was so taken back. And you know what? I was truly happy to see a Caribbean um, actors and actresses really get, such, really able to really be such a powerful and impactful and intriguing and very mainstream film um miniseries. Let me tell you, if you go check it out, even on in the Instagram page for Black Cake, you would read the comments. The comments that tells you that this is the real deal, and I love to see that with the the Caribbean actors and actresses. I didn't get deep into um the heritage and where they originate from, but spot on. The accent was spot on. The acting was spot on. Um, although I think one or two of the actors were actually British, but they did the Caribbean accent. Mwah, very good. That movie actually made me feel because I also am in the film industry as an actress as well. And sometimes I'm like, oh, do I have to get into getting an American accent in order for me to really flourish as an actress? And my accent is like I love my accent, and I just wish that we had a lot more that our accent as Caribbean people were more embraced, so we don't have to like change our accent in order to get into mainstream media and in order to be seen as a very powerful, influential actor or actress. That we can speak our language, we can speak in our same colloquial terms, um, whether we speak Creole, um, tout ça nous ka di, tout ça nous vle di, nous ke di other language, no, nous ke di, we will be able to speak it in our own language. It will be really great. And once, when I saw that film, when I watched the trailer, I was like, oh my God, I gotta see this. And then I sat and I binge watched, you know the mini series, and every time I look forward for when the new episode comes out, and I was like, oh my god, I wish this could be much longer. I wish it could be like a season two. I know it was just a mini series, but I wish they could like really prolong and really stretch it to be a series two. But maybe something greater will come up. That would be awesome. So get into it, Black Cake. Make sure you get into it. Seeing that I have watched the movie intensely, I know very much everything about what it is about. But if you check out the reviews, for Black Cake, the people say a delicious debut. Um, Opera Daily says ravishing. Definitely, that's a good word to describe it. Glamour says thrilling. It's really good. Vulture says crafted with delicate intention and textured with a blend of perspectives. Well said. You know, And so basically, Eleanor Bennett um, is one of the main characters in the book. And this book is written by Shaman Wilkerson. And let me tell you, it's a really great read. It's a New York Times bestseller. hmm And I went and I checked out who Shaman Wilkerson was, the writer. And this is actually, I think that's her first book. So kudos to her. That's such an incredible best-selling book. The reviews in this book, the reviews. I'm telling you, this Black Cake. Go watch it. watch it and come listen with me as I read to you. So I'm just gonna start off. I'm not gonna get into much of it on this episode, but I am just going to read um this part one. I'm just gonna read just this one part one. Okay. Because I know. Oh my God. It brings out all the feels. This brings out all the feels. And it has a lot of turns and twists in it. That's unexpected turns and twists. It's not predictable. As you but and it's really a great thriller. And I feel like they could go really more with this. So hopefully they bring on another season. I was so engaged. I was so invested in this. In Black Cake. So we're gonna bring Black Let's start off with now. Now, 2018. It goes now and then goes back. And it goes now and goes back. I love series like this. I love movies like this that goes back and forth into future and past, and in between. I just love that. Here we go. She's here. Byron hears the elevator doors peel open. His first instinct is to rush towards his sister and embrace her. But when Benny leans in to hug him, Byron pushes her away, then turns to knock on the door to the attorney's office. He feels Benny put a hand on his arm. He shakes it free. Benny stands there, her mouth open, but says nothing. And what right does she have to say anything? Byron hasn't seen Benny in 8 years, and now their ma is gone for good. What does Benny expect? She took a family argument and turned it into a cold war. Never mind all that talk about a societal rejection and discrimination and whatnot. It seems to Byron that whatever kind of problem you have in this world, you can find someone to show you understanding. And times are changing. There's even been a study in the news recently about people like Benny. People like Benny. The study says it can be a lonely road for people like her, but she won't be getting any sympathy from Byron. No. Benny, Benedetta Bennett gave up that luxury years ago. She turned her back on her family, even though she claimed it was the other way around. At least she showed up this time. 6 years ago, Byron and his mother sat in the church across from his father's coffin up in LA County, waiting for Benny to arrive. But no Benny. Later, Byron thought he saw his sister skirting the burial grounds in the back of a car. She'd be there any minute, he thought. But still, no Benny. Only a text from her later saying, I'm sorry, then silence for months at a time, then years. As each year went by, he was less certain that Benny had been there that day or that he'd ever had a sister to begin with, that he'd ever had a chubby, squiggle headed baby girl following him around the house, that she'd ever cheered him on at the national meets, that he'd ever heard her voice sailing across the auditorium as he closed his hand around his doctoral diploma, that he'd ever not felt the way he does right now, offended, pissed as hell. Okay, guys, that's it. Dee Tea Podcast. I appreciate you for tuning in on my very, very first intro episode. So, If you guys any got any recommendation, let me know of any books so I can get and read to you right here on Dee Tea Podcast. Make sure to follow me and listen on all platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Listen to Dee Tea Podcast. I'm gonna provide all the links and everything right on below. So make sure you tune in. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, DT Podcast. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you next time on another read with me, Deborah. Bye.